Rumplestiltzkin. There was once upon a time a poor miller who had a very beautiful daughter. Now it happened one day that he had an audience with the king, and in order to appear a person of some importance, he told him that he had a daughter who could spin straw into gold.
"Now that's a talent worth having," said the king to the miller. "If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her to my palace tomorrow, and I'll put her to the test."
When the girl was brought to him, he led her into a room full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and spindle, and said,
"Now set to work and spin all night till early dawn, and if by that time you haven't spun the straw into gold, you shall die."
Then he closed the door behind him and left her alone inside. So the poor miller's daughter sat down and didn't know what in the world she was to do. She hadn't the least idea of how to spin straw into gold, and became at last so miserable that she began to cry. Suddenly the door opened, and in stepped a tiny little man, and said,
"Good evening, Miss Miller-maid. Why are you crying so bitterly?"
"Oh," answered the girl, "I have to spin straw into gold, and I haven't a notion how it's done."
"What will you give me if I spin it for you?"
asked the mannikin. "My necklace," replied the girl. The little man took the necklace, sat down at the wheel, and whir, 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 the wheel went round 3 times, and the bobbin was full. Then he put on another, and whir, 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 the wheel went round 3 times, and the second too was full. And so it went on till the morning, when all the straw was spun away, and all the bobbins were full of gold. As soon as the sun rose, the king came, and when he perceived the gold, he was astonished and delighted, but his heart only lusted more than ever after the precious metal. He had the miller's daughter put into another room full of straw, much bigger than the first, and bade her, if she valued her life, spin it all into gold before the following morning. The girl didn't know what to do, and began to cry. Then the door opened as before, and the tiny little man appeared and said,
"What will you give me if I spin the straw into gold for you?"
"The ring on my finger," answered the girl. The mannikin took the ring, and whir, round went the spinning wheel again, and when morning broke he had spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king was pleased beyond measure at the sights, but his greed for gold was still not satisfied, and he had the miller's daughter brought into yet a bigger room full of straw, and said,
"You must spin all this away in the night, but if you succeed this time, you shall become my wife." "She's only a miller's daughter, it's true," he thought, "but I couldn't find a richer wife if I were to search the whole world over."
When the girl was alone, the little man appeared for the 3rd time and said,
"What will you give me if I spin the straw for you once again?"
"I've nothing more to give," answered the girl.
"Then promise me when you are queen to give me your first child."
"Who knows what may not happen before that?" thought the miller's daughter, and besides, she saw no other way out of it. So she promised the mannikin what he demanded, and he set to work once more and spun the straw into gold. When the king came in the morning and found everything as he had desired, he straightway made her his wife, and the miller's daughter became a queen. When a year had passed, a beautiful son was born to her, and she thought no more of the little man, till all of a sudden one day he stepped into her room and said,
"Now give me what you promised."
The queen was in a great state, and offered the little man all the riches in her kingdom if he would only leave her the child. But the mannikin said,
"No, a living creature is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world."
Then the queen began to cry and sob so bitterly that the little man was sorry for her, and said,
"I'll give you 3 days to guess my name, and if you find it out in that time, you may keep your child."
Then the queen pondered the whole night over all the names she had ever heard, and sent a messenger to scour the land, and to pick up far and near any names he could come across. When the little man arrived on the following day, she began with Casper, Melchior, Belshazzar, and all the other names she knew in a string. But each one the mannikin called out,
"That's not my name."
The next day she sent to inquire the names of all the people in the neighborhood, and had a long list of the most uncommon and extraordinary for the little man when he made his appearance. "Is your name perhaps Sheepshanks?" Cruikshanks? Spindleshanks?
But he always replied, "That's not my name."
On the third day, the messenger returned and announced, I have not been able to find any new names, but as I came upon a high hill round the corner of the wood, where the foxes and hares bid each other good night, I saw a little house, and in front of the house burned a fire, and round the fire sprang the most grotesque little man, hopping on one leg and crying,
"Tomorrow I brew, today I bake, and then the child away I'll take. For little deems my royal dame that Rumplestiltzkin is my name."
You can imagine the queen's delight at hearing the name, and when the little man stepped in shortly afterwards and asked,
"Now, my lady queen, what's my name?"
she asked first, Is your name Conrad?
"No."
Is your name Harry?
"No."
Is your name perhaps Rumplestiltzkin?
"Some demon has told you that! Some demon has told you that!"
Screamed the little man, and in his rage drove his right foot so far into the ground that it sank it up to his waist. Then in a passion he seized the left foot with both hands and tore himself in two. The tale of a youth who set out to learn what fear was. A father had 2 sons, of whom the eldest was clever and bright, and always knew what he was about. But the youngest was stupid and couldn't learn or understand anything. So much so that those who saw him exclaimed, What a burden he'll be to his father! Now when there was anything to be done, the eldest had always to do it. But if something was required later or in the night time, and the way led through the churchyard or some ghostly place, he always replied, Oh no, father, nothing will induce me to go there. It makes me shudder. For he was afraid. Or, when they sat of an evening around the fire, telling stories which made one's flesh creep, the listeners sometimes said, Oh, it makes one shudder. The youngest sat in a corner, heard the exclamation, and could not understand what it meant. They are always saying it makes one shudder. It makes one shudder. Nothing makes me shudder. It's probably an art quite beyond me. Now it happened that his father said to him one day, Hearken, you there in the corner, you are growing big and strong, and you must learn to earn your own bread. Look at your brother, what pains he takes, but all the money I've spent on your education is thrown away. My dear father, he replied, I will gladly learn. In fact, if it were possible, I should like to learn to shudder. I don't understand that a bit yet. The eldest laughed when he heard this, and thought to himself, Good heavens, what a ninny my brother is! He'll never come to any good. As the twig is bent, so is the tree inclined. The father sighed and answered him, You'll soon learn to shudder, but that won't help you make a living. Shortly after this, when the sexton came to pay them a visit, the father broke out to him and told him what a bad hand his youngest son was at everything. He knew nothing and learned nothing. Only think, when I asked him how he purposed gaining a livelihood, he actually asked to be taught to shudder. If that's all he wants, said the sexton, I can teach him that. Just you send him to me, I'll soon polish him up. The father was quite pleased with the proposal, because he thought, It'll be a good discipline for the youth. And so the sexton took him into his house, and his duty was to toll the bell. After a few days he woke him at midnight, and bade him rise and climb into the tower and toll. Now, my friend, I'll teach you to shudder, thought he. He stole forth secretly in front, and when the youth was up above, and had turned round to grasp the bell rope, he saw, standing opposite the hole of the belfry, a white figure. Who's there? He called out, but the figure gave no answer, and neither stirred nor moved. Answer, cried the youth, or be gone. You have no business here at this hour of the night. But the sexton remained motionless, so that the youth might think that it was a ghost. The youth called out the second time, What do you want here? Speak if you are an honest fellow, or I'll knock you down the stairs. The sexton thought, He can't mean that in earnest, so gave forth no sound, and stood as though he were made of stone. Then the youth shouted out to him the third time, and as that too had no effect, he made a dash at the spectre and knocked it down the stairs, so that it fell about 10 steps and remained lying in the corner. Thereupon he tolled the bell,
went home to bed without saying a word, and fell asleep. The sexton's wife waited a long time for her husband, but he never appeared. At last she became anxious and woke the youth and asked, "Don't you know where my husband is? He went up to the tower in front of you." "No," answered the youth, "but someone stood on the stairs up there just opposite the trap door in the belfry, and because he wouldn't answer me or go away, I took him for a rogue and knocked him down. You'd better go and see if it was he. I should be much distressed if it were." The wife ran and found her husband, who was lying groaning in a corner with his leg broken. She carried him down and then hurried with loud protestations to the youth's father. "Your son has been the cause of a pretty misfortune," she cried. "He threw my husband downstairs so that he broke his leg. Take the good-for-nothing wretch out of our house." The father was horrified, hurried to the youth, and gave him a scolding. "What unholy pranks are these? The evil one must have put them into your head." "Father," he replied, "only listen to me. I am quite guiltless. He stood there in the night, like one who meant harm. I didn't know who he was, and warned him 3 times to speak or be gone." "Oh," groaned the father, "you'll bring me nothing but misfortune. Get out of my sight. I won't have anything more to do with you." "Yes, father, willingly. Only wait till daylight, and then I'll set out and learn to shudder, and in that way I shall be master of an art which will gain me a living." "Learn what you will," said the father. "It's all one to me. Here are $50 for you. Set forth into the wide world with them, but see you tell no one where you came from or who your father is, for I am ashamed of you." "Yes, father, whatever you wish, and if that's all you ask, I can easily keep it in mind." When day broke, the youth put the $50 into his pocket, set out on the hard, high road, and kept muttering to himself, "If only I could shudder! If only I could shudder!" Just at this moment, a man came by who heard the youth speaking to himself. And when they had gone on a bit and were in sight of the gallows, the man said to him, "Look, there is a tree where 7 people have been hanged, and are now learning to fly. Sit down under it and wait till nightfall, and then you'll pretty soon learn to shudder." "If that's all I have to do," answered the youth, "it's easily done. But if I learn to shudder so quickly, then you shall have my $50. Just come back to me tomorrow morning early." Then the youth went to the gallows tree and sat down underneath it and waited for the evening. And because he felt cold, he lit himself a fire. But at midnight it got so chill that in spite of the fire, he couldn't keep warm. And as the wind blew the corpses one against the other, tossing them to and fro, he thought to himself, "If you are perishing down here by the fire, how those poor things up there must be shaking and shivering." And because he had a tender heart, he put up a ladder, which he climbed, unhooked one body after the other, and took down all 7. Then he stirred the fire, blew it up, and placed them all round in a circle, that they might warm themselves. But they sat there and did not move, and the fire caught their clothes. Then he spoke, "Take care, or I'll hang you up again." But the dead men did not hear and let their rags go on burning. Then he got angry and said, "If you aren't careful yourself, then I can't help you, and I don't mean to burn with you." And he hung them up again in a row. Then he sat down at his fire and fell asleep. On the following morning the man came to him, and wishing to get his $50, said, "Now you know what it is to shudder." "No," he answered. "How should I? Those fellows up there never opened their mouths, and were so stupid that they let those few old tatters they have on their bodies burn." Then the man saw he wouldn't get his $50 that day, and went off, saying, "Well, I'm blessed if I ever met such a person in my life before." The youth went too on his way, and began to murmur to himself, "Oh, if I could only shudder! Oh, if I could only shudder!" A carrier who was walking behind him heard these words, and asked him, "Who are you?" "I don't know," said the youth. "Where do you hail from?" "I don't know." "Who's your father?" "I mayn't say." "What are you constantly muttering to yourself?" "Oh," said the youth, "I would give worlds to shudder, but no one can teach me." "Stuff and nonsense," spoke the carrier. "Come along with me, and I'll soon put that right." The youth went with the carrier, and in the evening they reached an inn, where they would spend the night. Then, just as he was entering the room, he said again, quite aloud, Oh, if I could only shudder! If I could only shudder! The landlord, who heard this, laughed and said,
If that's what you're sighing for, you should be given every opportunity here.
Oh, hold your tongue, said the landlord's wife. So many people have paid for their curiosity with their lives. If it were 1,000 pities if those beautiful eyes were never again to behold daylight. But the youth said, No matter how difficult, I insist on learning it. Why, that's what I've set out to do. He left the landlord no peace till he told him that in the neighborhood stood a haunted castle, where one could easily learn to shudder if one only kept watch in it for 3 nights. The king had promised the man who dared to do this thing his daughter as wife, and she was the most beautiful maiden under the sun. There was also much treasure hid in the castle, guarded by evil spirits, which would then be free, and was sufficient to make a poor man more than rich. Many had already gone in, but so far none had ever come out again. So the youth went to the king and spoke. If I were allowed, I should much like to watch for 3 nights in the castle. The king looked at him, and because he pleased him, he said, You can ask for 3 things, none of them living, and those you may take with you into the castle. Then he answered, Well, I shall beg for a fire, a turning lathe, and a carving bench with a knife attached. On the following day, the king had everything put into the castle. And when night drew on, the youth took up his position there, lit a bright fire in one of the rooms, placed the carving bench with the knife close to it, and sat himself down on the turning lathe. Oh, if I could only shudder, he said, but I shan't learn it here. Toward midnight he wanted to make up the fire, and as he was blowing up a blaze, he heard a shriek from the corner. Oh my, how cold we are! You fools, he cried. Why do you scream? If you're cold, come and sit at the fire and warm yourselves. And as he spoke, 2 huge black cats sprang fiercely forward and sat down, one on each side of him, and gazed wildly at him with their fiery eyes. After a time, when they had warmed themselves, they said, Friend, shall we play a little game of cards? Why not? He replied. But first, let me see your paws. Then they stretched out their claws. Ha! Said he. What long nails you've got! Wait a minute, I must first cut them off. Thereupon he seized them by the scruff of their necks, lifted them up onto the carving bench, and screwed down their paws firmly. After watching you narrowly, he said, I no longer feel any desire to play cards with you. And with these words he struck them dead and threw them out into the water. But when he had thus sent the 2 of them to their final rest, and was again about to sit down at the fire, out of every nook and corner came forth black cats and black dogs, with fiery chains in such swarms that he couldn't possibly get away from them. They yelled in the most ghastly manner, jumped upon his fire, scattered it all, and tried to put it out. He looked on quietly for a time, but when it got beyond a joke, he seized his carving knife and called out, Be off, you rabble-rout, and let fly at them. Some of them fled away, and the others he struck dead and threw them out into the pond below. When he returned, he blew up the sparks of the fire once more and warmed himself. And as he sat thus, his eyes refused to keep open any longer, and a desire to sleep stole over him. Then he looked around him and beheld in the corner a large bed. The very thing, he said, and laid himself down in it. But when he wished to close his eyes, the bed began to move by itself, and ran all round the castle. Capital, he said, only a little quicker. Then the bed sped on, as if drawn by 6 horses, over thresholds and stairs, up this way and down that. All of a sudden, crash, crash! With a bound it turned over, upside down, and lay like a mountain on the top of him. But he tossed the blankets and pillows in the air, emerged from underneath, and said, Now anyone who has the fancy for it may go for a drive. Lay down at his fire, and slept till daylight. In the morning the king came, and when he beheld him lying on the ground, he imagined the ghost had been too much for him, and that he was dead. Then he said, What a pity, and such a fine fellow he was. The youth heard this, got up, and said, It's not come to that yet. Then the king was astonished, but very glad, and asked how it had fared with him. First rate, he answered, and now I've survived the 1 night, I shall get through the other 2 also. The landlord, when he went to him, opened his eyes and said, Well,
I never thought to see you alive again. Have you learned now what shuddering is?
No, he replied. It's quite hopeless. If someone could only tell me how to. The second night he went up again to the old castle, sat down at the fire, and began his old refrain. If I could only shudder. As midnight approached, a noise in a den broke out, at first gentle, but gradually increasing. Then all was quiet for a minute, and at length, with a loud scream, half of a man dropped down the chimney and fell before him. Hi up there, shouted he. There's another half wanted down here. That's not enough. Then the din commenced once more. There was a shrieking and a yelling, and then the other half fell down. Wait a bit, he said. I'll stir up the fire for you. When he had done this and again looked around, the two pieces had united, and a horrible-looking man sat on his seat. Come, said the youth. I didn't bargain for that. The seat is mine. The man tried to shove him away, but the youth wouldn't allow it for a moment, and, pushing him off by force, sat down in his place again. Then more men dropped down, one after the other, who, fetching 9 skeleton legs and 2 skulls, put them up and played ninepins with them. The youth thought he would like to play too, and said, Look here, do you mind my joining the game? No, not if you have money. I've money enough, he replied. But your balls aren't round enough. Then he took the skulls, placed them on his lathe, and turned them till they were round. Now they'll roll along better, said he, and hoopla, now the fun begins. He played with them and lost some of his money, but when 12 struck, everything vanished before his eyes. He lay down and slept peacefully. The next morning the king came, anxious for news.
How have you got on this time? He asked.
I played ninepins, he answered, and lost a few pence.
Didn't you shudder then?
No such luck, said he. I made myself merry. Oh, if I only knew what it was to shudder. On the third night he sat down again on his bench and said, in the most desponding way, If I could only shudder. When it got late, 6 big men came in carrying a coffin. Then he cried, Ha! Ha! That's most likely my little cousin who only died a few days ago. And beckoning with his finger, he called out, Come, my small cousin, come. They placed the coffin on the ground, and he approached it and took off the cover. In it lay a dead man. He felt his face, and it was cold as ice. Wait, he said, I'll heat you up a bit. Went to the fire, warmed his hand, and laid it on the man's face, but the dead remained cold. Then he lifted him out, sat down at the fire, laid him on his knee, and rubbed his arms that the blood should circulate again. When that too had no effect, it occurred to him that if 2 people lay together in bed, they warmed each other. So he put him into the bed, covered him up, and lay down beside him. After a time, the corpse became warm and began to move. Then the youth said, Now, my little cousin, what would have happened if I hadn't warmed you?
But the dead man rose up and cried out, Now I will strangle you.
What? Said he. Is that all the thanks I get? You should be straight back into your coffin. Lifted him up, threw him in, and closed the lid. Then the 6 men came and carried him out again. I simply can't shudder, he said, and it's clear I shan't learn it in a lifetime here. Then a man entered, of more than ordinary size, and of a very fearful appearance, but he was old and had a white beard.
Oh, you miserable creature! Now you will soon know what it is to shudder, he cried, for you must die.
Not so quickly, answered the youth. If I am to die, you must catch me first.
I shall soon lay hold of you, spoke the monster.
Gently, gently, don't boast too much. I'm as strong as you, and stronger too.
We'll soon see, said the old man. If you are stronger than I, then I'll let you off. Come, let's have a try.
Then he led him through some dark passages to a forge, and grasping an axe, he drove one of the anvils with a blow into the earth. I can do better than that, cried the youth, and went to the other anvil. The old man drew near him in order to watch closely, and his white beard hung right down. The youth seized the axe, cleft the anvil open, and jammed in the old man's beard. Now I have you, said the youth. This time it's your turn to die. Then he seized an iron rod and belabored the old man till he, whimpering, begged him to leave off. and he would give him great riches. The youth drew out the axe and let him go. The old man led him back to the castle and showed him in a cellar 3 chests of gold.
"One of these," said he, "belongs to the poor, one to the king, and the third is yours."
At the moment 12 struck, and the spirit vanished, leaving the youth alone in the dark. "I'll surely be able to find a way out," said he, and groping about he at length found his way back to the room, and fell asleep at his fire. The next morning the king came and said,
"Well, now you've surely learned to shudder."
"No," he answered. "What can it be? My dead cousin was here, and an old bearded man came, who showed me heaps of money down below here, but what shuddering is no one has told me."
Then the king spoke. "You have freed the castle from its curse, and you shall marry my daughter."
"That's all charming," he said, "but I still don't know what it is to shudder." Then the gold was brought up, and the wedding was celebrated, but the young king, though he loved his wife dearly, and though he was very happy, still kept on saying, "If I could only shudder! If I could only shudder!" At last he reduced her to despair. Then her maid said, "I'll help you. We'll soon make him shudder." So she went out to the stream that flowed through the garden, and had a pail full of little gudgeons brought to her. At night, when the young king was asleep, his wife had to pull the clothes off him and pour the pail full of little gudgeons over him, so that the little fish swam all about him. Then he awoke and cried out, "Oh, how I shudder! How I shudder, dear wife! Yes, now I know what shuddering is." Why the Sea is Salt. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there were 2 brothers, the one rich and the other poor. When Christmas Eve came, the poor one had not a bite in the house, either of meat or bread, so he went to his brother and begged him, in God's name, to give him something for Christmas Day. It was by no means the first time that the brother had been forced to give something to him, and he was not better pleased at being asked now than he generally was.
"If you will do what I ask of you, you shall have the whole ham," said he.
The poor one immediately thanked him and promised this.
"Well, here is the ham, and now you must go straight to Dead Man's Hall," said the rich brother, throwing the ham to him.
"Well, I will do what I have promised," said the other, and he took the ham and set off. He went on for the livelong day, and at nightfall he came to a place where there was a bright light. "I have no doubt that this is the place," thought the man with the ham. An old man with a long white beard was standing in the outhouse chopping Yule logs. "Good evening," said the man with the ham.
"Good evening to you. What are you going at this late hour?" said the man.
"I am going to Dead Man's Hall, if only I am on the right track," answered the poor man.
"Oh, yes, you are right enough, for it is here," said the old man. "When you get inside, they will all want to buy your ham, for they don't get much meat to eat there. But you must not sell it unless you can get the hand mill which stands behind the door for it. When you come out again, I will teach you how to stop the hand mill, which is useful for almost everything."
So the man with the ham thanked the other for his good advice and rapped at the door. When he got in, everything happened just as the old man had said it would. All the people, great and small, came round him like ants on an ant-hill, and each tried to outbid the other for the ham. "By rights my old woman and I ought to have it for our Christmas dinner, but, since you have set your hearts upon it, I must just give it up to you," said the man. "But if I sell it, I will have the hand mill which is standing there behind the door." At first they would not hear of this, and haggled and bargained with the man, but he stuck to what he had said, and the people were forced to give him the hand mill. When the man came out again into the yard, he asked the old woodcutter how he was to stop the hand mill, and when he had learned that, he thanked him and set off home with all the speed he could. But he did not get there until after the clock had struck 12 on Christmas Eve. "Where in the world have you been?" said the old woman. "Here I have been sat waiting hour after hour, and have not even 2 sticks to lay across each other under the Christmas porridge pot." "Oh, I could not come before. I had something of importance to see about, and a long way to go, too. But now you shall just see," said the man. And then he set the hand mill on the table, and bade it first grind light, then a tablecloth, and then meat and beer, and everything else that was good for Christmas Eve supper. And the mill ground all that he ordered. "Bless me," said the old woman as one thing after another appeared, and she wanted to know where her husband had got the mill from, but he would not tell her that. "Never mind where I got it. You can see that it is a good one, and the water that turns it will never freeze," said the man. So he ground meat and drink and all kinds of good things to last all Christmas tide, and on the third day he invited all his friends to come to a feast. Now when the rich brother saw all that there was at the banquet and in the house, he was both vexed and angry, for he grudged everything his brother had. "On Christmas Eve he was so poor that he came to me and begged for a trifle, for God's sake. And now he gives a feast as if it were both a count and a king," thought he. "But, for heaven's sake, tell me where you got your riches from," said he to his brother. "From behind the door," said he who owned the mill, for he did not choose to satisfy his brother on that point. But later in the evening, when he had taken a drop too much, he could not refrain from telling how he had come by the hand-mill. "There you see what has brought me all my wealth," said he, and brought out the mill and made it grind first one thing and then another. When the brother saw that, he insisted on having the mill, and after a great deal of persuasion got it. But he had to give $300 for it, and the poor brother was to keep it till the haymaking was over, for he thought, "If I keep it as long as that, I can make it grind meat and drink that will last many a long year." During that time you may imagine that the mill did not grow rusty, and when hay harvest came the rich brother got it. But the other had taken good care not to teach him how to stop it. It was evening when the rich man got the mill home, and in the morning he bade the old woman go out and spread the hay after the mowers, and he would attend to the house himself that day, he said. So when dinner time drew near, he set the mill on the kitchen table and said, "Grind herrings and milk pottage, and do it quickly and well." So the mill began to grind herrings and milk pottage, and first all the dishes and tubs were filled, and then it came out all over the kitchen floor. The man twisted and turned it, and did all he could to make the mill stop, but howsoever he turned it and screwed it, the mill went on grinding, and in a short time the pottage rose so high that the man was like to be drowned. So he threw open the parlor door, but it was not long before the mill had ground the parlor full too, and it was with difficulty and danger that the man could go through the stream of pottage and get hold of the door latch. When he got the door open, he did not stay long in the room, but ran out, and the herrings and pottage came after him, and it streamed out over both farm and field. Now the old woman, who was out spreading the hay, began to think dinner was long in coming, and said to the women and to the mowers, "Though the master does not call us home, we may as well go. It may be that he finds he is not good at making pottage, and I should do well to help him." So they began to straggle homeward. But when they had got a little way up the hill, they met the herrings and pottage and bread, all pouring forth and winding about one over the other, and the man himself in front of the flood. "Would to heaven that each of you had 100 stomachs! Take care that you are not drowned in the pottage," he cried as he went by them, as if mischief were at his heels, down to where his brother dwelt. Then he begged him, for God's sake, to take the mill back again, and that in an instant, for, said he, "if it grind 1 hour more, the whole district will be destroyed by herrings and pottage." But the brother would not take it until the other paid him $300, and that he was obliged to do. Now the poor brother had both the money and the mill again, so it was not long before he had a farmhouse much finer than that in which his brother lived. But the mill ground him so much money that he covered it with plates of gold, and the farmhouse lay close by the seashore, so it shone and glittered far out to sea. Everyone who sailed by there now had to be put in to visit the rich man in the gold farmhouse, and everyone wanted to see the wonderful mill, for the report of it spread far and wide, and there was no one who had not heard tell of it. After a long, long time came also a skipper who wished to see the mill. He asked if it could make salt. Yes, it could make salt, said he who owned it, and when the skipper heard that, he wished with all his might and main to have the mill, let it cost what it might, for he thought, if he had it, he would get off having to sail far away over the perilous seas for freights of salt. At first the man would not hear of parting with it, but the skipper begged and prayed, and at last the man sold it to him and got many, many $1,000s for it. When the skipper had got the mill on his back, he did not stay there long, for he was so afraid that the man would change his mind, and he had no time to ask how he was to stop it grinding, but got on board his ship as fast as he could. When he had gone a little way out to sea, he took the mill on deck.
"Grind salt, and grind both quickly and well," said the skipper.
So the mill began to grind salt, till it spouted out like water. And when the skipper had got the ship filled, he wanted to stop the mill. But whichsoever way he turned it, and how much soever he tried, it went on grinding. And the heap of salt grew higher and higher, until at last the ship sank. There lies the mill at the bottom of the sea, and still, day by day, it grinds on, and that is why the sea is salt. The Master Cat, or Puss in Boots. There was a miller who left no more estate to the 3 sons he had than his mill, his ass, and his cat. The partition was soon made. Neither scrivener nor attorney was sent for. They would soon have eaten up all the poor patrimony. The eldest had the mill, the second the ass, and the youngest nothing but the cat. The poor young fellow was quite comfortless at being so poor a lot. "My brothers," said he, "may get their living handsomely enough by joining their stocks together. But for my part, when I have eaten up my cat, and made me a muff of skin, I must die of hunger." The cat, who heard all this, but made as if he did not, said to him with a grave and serious air, "Do not thus afflict yourself, my good master. You have nothing else to do but to give me a bag and get a pair of boots made for me, that I may scamper through the dirt and the brambles, and you shall see that you have not so bad a portion in me as you imagine." The cat's master did not build very much upon what he said. He had often seen him play a great many cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, as when he used to hang by the heels, or hide himself in the meal, and make as if he were dead, so that he did not altogether despair of his affording him some help in his miserable condition. When the cat had what he asked for, he booted himself very gallantly, and putting his bag around his neck, he held the strings of it in his 2 forepaws, and went into a warren where was a great abundance of rabbits. He put bran and sow thistle into his bag, and, stretching out at length, as if he had been dead, he waited for some young rabbits, not yet acquainted with the deceits of the world, to come and rummage his bag for what he had put into it. Scarce was he lain down, but he had what he wanted. A rash and foolish young rabbit jumped into his bag, and Monsieur Puss, immediately drawing close the strings, took and killed him without pity. Proud of his prey, he went with it to the palace, and asked to speak with his majesty. He was shown upstairs into the king's apartment, and, making a low reverence, said to him, "I have brought you, sir, a rabbit of the warren, which my noble lord, the Marquis of Carabas," for that was the title which Puss was pleased to give his master, "has commanded me to present to your majesty from him."
"Tell thy master," said the king, "that I thank him, and that he does me a great deal of pleasure."
Another time he went and hid himself among some standing corn, holding still his bag open, and when a brace of partridges ran into it, he drew the strings and so caught them both. He went and made a present of these to the king, as he had done before of the rabbit which he had took into the warren. The king, in like manner, received the partridges with great pleasure, and ordered him some money for drink. The cat continued for 2 or 3 months thus to carry his majesty, from time to time, game of his master's taking. One day in particular, when he knew for certain that he was to take the air along the riverside, with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world, he said to his master, "If you will follow my advice, your fortune is made. You have nothing else to do but go and wash yourself in the river. In that part I shall show you, and leave the rest to me." The Marquis of Carabas did what the cat advised him to, without knowing why or wherefore. While he was washing, the king passed by, and the cat began to cry out, "Help! Help! My lord Marquis of Carabas is going to be drowned!" At this noise, the king put his head out of the coach window, and, finding that it was the cat who had so often brought him such good game, he commanded his guards to run immediately to the assistance of his lordship, the Marquis of Carabas. While they were drawing the poor Marquis out of the river, the cat came up to the coach and told the king that, while his master was washing, there came by some rogues, who went off with his clothes, though he had cried out, "Thieves! Thieves!" several times, as loud as he could. This cunning cat had hidden them under a great stone. The king immediately commanded the officers of his wardrobe to run and fetch one of his best suits for the Lord Marquis of Carabas. The king caressed him after a very extraordinary manner, and as the fine clothes he had given him extremely set off his good mien, for he was well made and very handsome in his person, the king's daughter took a secret inclination to him, and the Marquis of Carabas had no sooner cast 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances, but she fell in love with him to distraction. The king would needs have him come into the coach and take part of the airing. The cat, quite overjoyed to see his project begin to succeed, marched on before, and, meeting with some countrymen who were mowing a meadow, he said to them, "Good people, you who are mowing, if you do not tell the king that the meadow you mow belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The king did not fail asking of the mowers to whom the meadow they were mowing belonged. "To my lord Marquis of Carabas," answered they all together, for the cat's threats had made them terribly afraid.
"You see, sir," said the Marquis, "this is a meadow which never fails to yield a plentiful harvest every year."
The master cat, who went still on before, met with some reapers, and said to them, "Good people, you who are reaping, if you do not tell the king that all this corn belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as herbs for the pot." The king, who passed by a moment after, would needs know to whom all that corn, which he then saw, did belong. "To my lord Marquis of Carabas," replied the reapers, and the king was very well pleased with it, as well as the Marquis, whom he congratulated thereupon. The master cat, who went always before, said the same words to all he met, and the king was astonished at the vast estates of my lord Marquis of Carabas. Monsieur Puss came at last to a stately castle, the master of which was an ogre, the richest had ever been known, for all the lands which the king had then gone over belonged to this castle. The cat, who had taken care to inform himself who this ogre was and what he could do, asked to speak with him, saying he could not pass so near his castle without having the honor of paying his respects to him. The ogre received him as civilly as an ogre could do, and made him sit down. "I have been assured," said the cat, "that you have the gift of being able to change yourself into all sorts of creatures you have a mind to. You can, for example, transform yourself into a lion or elephant and the like."
"That is true," answered the ogre very briskly, "and to convince you, you shall now see me become a lion."
Puss was so sadly terrified at the sight of a lion so near him that he immediately got into the gutter, not without abundance of trouble and danger, because of his boots, which were of no use at all to him in walking upon the tiles. A little while after, when Puss saw that the ogre had resumed his natural form, he came down, and owned he had been very much frightened. "I have been, moreover, informed," said the cat, "but I know not how to believe it, that you also have the power to take on you the shape of the smallest animals. For example, to change yourself into a rat or a mouse, but I must own to you, I take this as impossible."
"Impossible!" cried the ogre. "You shall see that presently."
And at the same time he changed himself into a mouse, and began to run about the floor. Puss no sooner perceived this, but he fell upon him and ate him up. Meanwhile the king, who saw as he passed this fine castle of the ogres, had a mind to go into it. Puss, who heard the noise of his majesty's coach running over the drawbridge, ran out and said to the king, "Your majesty is welcome to this castle of my lord Marquis of Carabas."
"What? My lord Marquis!" cried the king. "And does this castle also belong to you? There can be nothing finer than this court, and all the stately buildings which surround it. Let us go into it, if you please."
The Marquis gave his hand to the princess, and followed the king, who went first. They passed into a spacious hall, where they found a magnificent collation, which the ogre had prepared for his friends, who were that very day to visit him, but dared not to enter, knowing the king was there. His majesty was perfectly charmed with the good qualities of my lord Marquis of Carabas, as was his daughter, who had fallen violently in love with him, and seeing the vast estate he possessed, said to him, after having drunk of 5 or 6 glasses,
It will be owing to yourself only, my lord Marquis, if you are not my son-in-law.
The Marquis, making several low bows, accepted the honor which his Majesty conferred upon him, and forthwith, that very same day, married the princess. Puss became a great lord, and never ran after mice any more, but only for his diversion.